Resident Evil has some of the most creative designs when it comes down to the monsters in the series. Seriously, no video game franchise can compete with the amount of creatures that Resident Evil has brought us. And honestly, some of them get really weird. And I mean weird as hell. And in the true spirit of Halloween, I think it's time we highlight the weirdest of the weird when it comes to the monsters in Resident Evil. Rather they just feel out of place for a Resident Evil game, or they make us cringe at their disgusting look, these creatures are the ones that make us go, what the actual fuck am I looking at? Before we get started with today's video, I just want to thank Patreon Alpha team member King of Horror. Thanks for your suggestion, dude. I am really excited to do this topic. Remember, become an Alpha team member and you can choose which ranking videos you want me to do once per month in honor of your contributions, plus receive other benefits. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to see more ranking videos like this one, and that like button to help promote today's video. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerd Space Games, and this is my top 10 weirdest monsters in Resident Evil. Let's get it. Number 10, Ogroman, Resident Evil 6. Okay, so first off, sorry if I mispronounced that. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Anyways, Resident Evil is no stranger to giant monsters. Giant snakes, giant sharks, giant cave trolls. Yet one of the largest monsters we've encountered in the Resident Evil series is none other than these ogre-like giant creatures. Coming across at least 3 during Chris Redfield's campaign, these enormous monsters are some of the most mysterious creatures in the series. As I mentioned, Resident Evil has seen a huge list of huge monsters. However, we actually get pretty good info as to how each of these giant monsters were created. For example, those cave troll-like monsters in Resident Evil 4 are actually villagers from that game with unique mutations created during tests. Resident Evil 6 version of these monsters, what I like to call Ogroman, are unique in the fact that we don't know if these creatures are even human to begin with. There's just not enough information that supports that. All we know is that they were created in labs using the C virus, and that Carlo recommended that they should not be used for combat given their obvious weakness. But with their strange design and size, it's hard to actually see what these creatures are, or at least what they originally were. I'd assumed that they were human just like most of the creatures in the franchise, but just had unique mutations. The C virus might be one of the most unique viruses out there, as it seems to have different effects and mutations on different people. Still, a virus creating something this large with some sort of device sticking out of it that apparently controls it is easily one of the more mysterious and weirdest creatures in the series. Number 9, Bandersnatch, Resident Evil Code Veronica. The Bandersnatch is a creature that is found on Rockford Island in Resident Evil Code Veronica. This creature has an interesting background, as it's pretty much the black sheep of the Tyrant family. Yeah, the Tyrant. You know, final boss of Resident Evil, Mr. X, the boss on the cargo plane in this very game. Yeah, that Tyrant. You might not realize this just by looking at it though. That's because these creatures are better known as the more cost-efficient version of the Tyrant. See, to create the dominant monsters that we know well from previous Resident Evil games such as Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2, you need specific test subjects that carry a specific gene alongside a lot of money. So the Bandersnatch is basically the knockoff brand. The most unique thing about the appearance of the Bandersnatch is the extremely large right arm. In creating this creature, the left arm is completely removed during the process. In return, the Bandersnatch gets a longer right arm with super strength and elastic abilities, making it one of the only regular enemies in classic Resident Evil games to have a long-range attack. This creature makes the list for one of the weirdest enemies in the series thanks to its relation to one of the most iconic boss enemies in the series despite its differences, its odd yet effective appearance that allows it to attack from a distance, and the background behind why Umbrella created these monsters to begin with. Number 8, Lisa Trevor, Resident Evil Remake. Lisa Trevor is one of the most tragic characters in Resident Evil. I mean, seriously, this girl lost her father, lost her mother, and was experimented on by Umbrella with every single virus and strain that they had at their disposal. All of these reasons combined together to make Lisa Trevor one of the weirdest monsters in Resident Evil. For one, you don't really find us, the player, feeling bad for any monster in Resident Evil. Sure, most of them were innocent people or even test subjects, but we really don't get to see how tragic that really is. Well, until we meet Lisa Trevor. See, Lisa Trevor was a child when she was first infected with the virus. And unfortunately, she isn't just infected with just one virus like many of the monsters are throughout the series. This girl has multiple different strands and viruses inside of her, including variants of the T virus and the G virus. Lisa Trevor became this indestructible monster to the point where even Umbrella couldn't find a way to kill her. Eventually, this led to her escape during the Arclay Mountains incident. This is where Stars came across her and were face to face with one of the most terrifying looking creatures in the game. She stalked the Stars members throughout the game in search of her deceased mother. Bullets, grenades, nothing put Lisa Trevor down for good. Even the final boss fight in the game didn't officially kill Lisa Trevor, as we learn in the Umbrella Chronicles that she survived the jump. It wasn't until the Spencer Mansion blew up with her inside it that we finally saw Lisa Trevor die. Well, we assume so. Nothing could have survived that, right?
Be a good girl and stay dead this time.
Number 7, Torpedo Kids, Resident Evil, Dead Aim. These creatures are some of the weirdest, and technically they combine with another Resident Evil creature known as the Noctilus. Torpedo Kids are basically the babies of an aquatic creature that you find in Resident Evil Dead Aim. Noted as a failed test subject, the mother creature, aka the Noctilus, literally does nothing except give birth to baby monsters. Strangely enough though, it's the babies that are dangerous, not the mother. While the mother can't do any damage herself, the babies, aka the Torpedo Kids, shoot out of the mother through the water like a missile being shot out of a submarine. Hence the name. There are a lot of things that make the Torpedo Kids one of the weirdest creatures in Resident Evil. The fact that they are sea critters with worm-like bodies and a human-like face, for example. They honestly look like an eel and a human being had a baby. As I mentioned earlier, something else that's really weird about them is that they act like torpedoes or missiles sent to protect their mother versus the mother protecting her young. Yeah, that's kind of messed up. Finally, the last thing that makes these creatures really weird is the fact that they blow up on impact. So essentially, these babies are being sent through the waterway like a torpedo to then only make contact eventually and explode and die. That is horrible and a short way to live. Number 6, Regis Licker, Resident Evil Outbreak. In Resident Evil 2, we came across one of the most terrifying and disgusting creatures in the series, the Licker. Now, despite its animalistic appearance, we learned that Lickers are really just zombies that have gone through a rare metamorphosis of some kind, usually from feeding a lot. While Resident Evil 2 doesn't explore that transition farther than the explanation I just gave you guys, we do get to see that metamorphosis process firsthand in Resident Evil Outbreak. Meet Regis Licker, aka the Scagdead. This is one of the creepiest and weirdest monster designs in the series. This monster still has a lot of features resembling a human. The shape of a human, the facial features, legs, arms, all of the above. However, it also starts to resemble a Licker at the same time. Most notably, you have that famous Licker tongue giving her the ability to whip the characters from long range. She also shares the same crimson colors that we've seen on the Lickers as well, and also has the ability to hang from the ceiling. Hence where you get the nickname, the Scagdead. Get it? The Licker might be one of the scariest and most interesting creatures in Resident Evil. However, this pre-Licker design will forever remain as one of the weirdest creatures in the series. Number 5, the Scagdead, Resident Evil Revelations. Nothing can prepare you for your first encounter with a Scagdead in Resident Evil Revelations. Despite the game featuring probably the weirdest designs for basic enemies as a whole compared to the rest of the series, oozes are not incredibly weird or disgusting enough to make the list on their own. However, a variation of them on the other hand can. Your first encounter with a Scagdead is actually in the cafeteria leading up to a voice repeating the phrase, Mayday. The voice alone is enough to make you want to turn and run the hell away. Eventually though, you'll push through and make your way to a locked door. Releasing this lock will then put you face to face with one of the most dangerous and terrifying creatures in the game, the Scagdead. This monster is an abomination. It takes the appearance of regular enemies throughout the game, the oozes, and combines it with every nightmare-like thing that you can think of. The top of its head resembles a Venus flytrap that's made just for devouring humans. One of its arms is replaced with a chainsaw-like weapon. Meanwhile, attached to the side of this already horrendous creature is a human-like figure that looks like it is screaming out of pain. Seriously, this monster looks like it took multiple different things out of your nightmares to create this abomination. And get this isn't even the weirdest monster in this game. Number 4, G-Type, Resident Evil 2, and also Resident Evil Outbreak. If you thought that the Torpedo Kids were weird, let me introduce you to yet another offspring species. This time we take a look at William Birkin's very own offspring, the G-Type monsters. We all know the story of Birkin, Umbrella researcher that's obsessed with his work on the G-Virus. Fast forward to the Raccoon City incident and we see Birkin inject himself with the very virus that he created, giving us G-Birkin. However, Sherry Birkin isn't the only offspring that William has. After becoming G-Birkin, he's given the ability to reproduce by implanting humans with an embryo, therefore creating creatures known as G. Yeah, that's it, just G. There are 2 different variations of G monsters, and let me tell you, you see them a lot in the series. Resident Evil 2, the 2019 remake, and hell, even Resident Evil Outbreak. But as I mentioned, there are 2 different versions of the G monsters. There are G adults and G young. G adults come in all different versions, with each game adding something new to them. For example, in the remake of Resident Evil 2, we see these large creatures hiding in the sewers as they wait for you to get close to them. Then once you're close enough, they burst forward towards you in a rapid swim to grab you and poison you. They can even shoot G young at you. The original game, however, was treated more like a boss fight as it slowly moves towards you and sends young G monsters forward to attack you. And there are 2 unique traits that make these creatures one of the weirdest in the series. One, the fact that they can only be created by G. Birkin when he implants embryos into humans, and the second thing being the look of them. Seriously, the young G monsters look like baby xenomorphs that pop out of people's chests in the Alien movies, and the G adult is like one giant clusterfuck of different body parts all smushed together in one huge monstrosity.
Your fault.
What?
Took too long.
What happened? Oh God! Get off me!
William.
Oh my God!
Number 3, Globster, Resident Evil Revelations. In a game that probably has the weirdest monster designs out of the entire series, you would think that the Scagdead would be the weirdest of the weird from this game, but no. Earlier into the game, even before you come face to face with the Scagdead, you actually get the opportunity to meet, wait for it, John Carpenter's The Thing. Okay, in all seriousness, Globster is one of the most horrific, disgusting, and weirdest looking creatures in Resident Evil. I'm sure you could have guessed from the name, but these creatures basically look like the giant blob monsters from the 80s horror movie, The Blob. These creatures are basically just one large hunk of flesh with teeth attached to the bottom of them. Terrifying, right? Now, while the design of these creatures aren't as crazy and over the top as other creatures are on this list, the fact that this basic design still creates an extremely disturbing experience is enough to make the list for the weirdest monsters in Resident Evil, in my opinion. Yet the look of these blob-like monsters are not the only thing that makes them weird and disturbing. It's also due to the fact that these globs of flesh with teeth were at some point and time human beings. They just lost all of their bones, organs, and any human characteristics due to the prolonged exposure to the T-Abyss virus. These Globsters are easily one of the most disturbing monsters in Resident Evil and easily cracks the list for the weirdest monsters in the series. Number 2, Baby Monster, Resident Evil Village. While the premise of the baby monster might be a little more basic compared to other entries on this list, the fact is that it is hands down one of the most out of place creatures in the series, therefore making it extremely weird for a Resident Evil game. So this creature pops up in the basement of House Benevito. Some would argue that this encounter is probably the scariest in the entire game. While roaming around the dark basement, you find a blood trail. Following this trail will eventually lead to some screeching sounds, following by a giant fetus. Yeah, you heard me right. A fucking fetus. This fetus is enormous and it will continue to slither towards you until you can find a hiding spot. The drag about this monster specifically is that you can't kill it. You just have to deal with the screams and hide away from it. Then make your move for the elevator to escape it. If you told me years back when I played the original Resident Evil 2 for the first time in 1998 that I would eventually come face to face with a giant fetus monster in the series, I would have called you a crazy lunatic. Yet here we are, guys, with the imagery of a giant fetus chasing us throughout the hall screaming "Dada." Yeah, makes me second guess the idea of having kids now. But before we take a look at number 1 for this list, let's take a look at a few entries that just barely missed out on making the list. Check it out.
Shit! Stay back!
The exit's underwater. You're done. You're like a goddamn cockroach! You think you can take me on? Fine. This will be my home before I kill that bitch. Let's settle this. Man, a man. Your corpse will be another addition to my army.
Number 1, Marguerite Baker, Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 7 doesn't have nearly as many monster designs as other Resident Evil games, thanks to a majority of the creatures in this game being different types of molded. Yet it's the boss enemies in the game that really stand out. More specifically, Marguerite Baker is hands down the most unique monster in the game. Whereas we get to see Jack, Lucas, and even Evelyn all turn into giant molded creatures, it's Marguerite who stands out the most with her design. See, Marguerite is basically a bug woman. She has the ability to essentially lay eggs and hatch bugs that can then turn around and become a huge headache for Ethan. Marguerite's appearance is, well, unnatural seems like the best word for it. It takes the slinkiness of a long leg spider and combines it with the human leg figure of Marguerite, which, by the way, she also has the ability to crawl on walls like a spider as well. All of these things combine to create one extremely disturbing woman. And if this was everything there was to say about Marguerite, then I believe she would still crack the list, just maybe not make it this far up. However, there is one more unique trait that makes this monster design completely insane and weird as hell. See, as I mentioned earlier, Marguerite lays eggs to hatch bugs. And she does this thanks to her, her very personal weak spot. This is a womb for laying eggs right around, it's in her no-no area. In order for Ethan to defeat Marguerite, he needs to, God, this keeps getting worse and worse, shoot this no-no area a lot. Yeah, I can never get that image out of my head. Straight up, for most people, they might find the Globster or baby monster more disturbing and weird. However, Marguerite's anatomy has been burned into my mind forever, and that image is the weirdest image I have ever seen in just about any game, let alone Resident Evil. Oh, Mrs. Baker, you're an interesting one for sure. But that does it for this episode of Nerd Space Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what creature throughout Resident Evil do you think is the weirdest and most disturbing monster design in the entire series. Did your choice make the list? Also become a Patreon and get benefits like selecting your own list video like this one that you want to see me do once per month by clicking the join button down below or heading over to patreon.com/nerdspacegames. But as always guys, I'll catch you on the next episode of Nerd Space. Take care.